at home. It's a psalm that speaks to us. I'm reading the first 3 verses. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When evildoers assail me, uttering slanders against me, my adversaries and foes, they shall stumble and fall. Though a host encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war arise against me, yet I will be confident. And this is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Well, I'm sure some of you are thinking, hot dog, we've come to the end of this series of sermons on the nuts and bolts of sane living. I hope that all of you have been sanitized by now and will think a little bit about some of the thoughts that we have shared about dealing with our depression, anger, guilt, now confidence, this confidence that we call self-confidence. Because our self-confidence can get worn away, eroded by all of these other things that we have discussed up to this closing point. And most of us have pretty good self-confidence, I believe. It kind of got started, though, when we were little children. So many of the aspects of our lives today go back to our childhood years. Now, as a little kid, did anybody ever try to bully you in school on that first day? Or maybe even the second or third day? Maybe you didn't cry on that day, but the teacher did along the way. Did they chase you around the schoolyard? Did they call you skinny or chubby? That you were not so hot in some of the ball games, the dodgeball, you didn't know how to jump fast enough? As they say, only white boys can't jump. I learned that early on. Did you learn to play Red Rover or dodgeball or the races and softball? Were any of you ever on the last one chosen when they would choose up sides? I was a skinny little fella, underweight, taking iron medicine to make me strong like Superman. And many times I was the last one chosen. I can remember those days. Did any of you have to wear hand-me-down clothes? I had a cousin, James, who was 5 years older than I am, or was in those days, and I wore a lot of his handed-down clothes. I was conscious that there were other children there who were having to wear homemade clothes that their mother or their grandma had made for them. They couldn't afford the store-bought clothes that some of the kids had on. And sometimes we might think we were a little bit uglier than some of the others that were there. And I know that a lot of us boys felt like we were really dumb with those smart girls that knew all the answers and would raise their hands very quickly when the teacher would ask the question. You could be called shorty, you could be called skinny, 4 eyes. There was one fellow that had glasses. He was known as 4 eyes. They called me Wee Willie on occasion. Later on, they called me Stinky Wilson. I'm used to that. But it's very easy in those early years, being about 4, 5, 6, or 7 years old, trying to get your self-confidence and your self-esteem started up very quickly. And many times from the erosion that comes in those earlier years from putting up with this stuff in the grammar school, it sometimes carries over into high school. But I remember one little fella was looking at his report card after he had not done too well, and he said, "I'm not an underachiever. My teacher is an over-expector." I had a number of those over-expector teachers along my way. Another fella thought of himself as a great baseball player. He had his bat, his glove, and his ball. He'd throw the ball up, take a swing at it, and miss. Spit in his glove, throw the ball up again, swing as hard as he could, another strike. Finally, he just looked at the glove, looked at the ball, looked at his bat, spit in his glove again, rubbed the ball in it, held it in the right way, threw it up, and swung as hard as he could. Strike 3. What a pitcher I am. I struck him out. Now that's the beginning of dealing with our self-confidence. That's where we have a breakthrough. Because these little fellas, though they may not have realized it, reframed the picture of themselves. And the picture that we have of our own ability, our own self, our belief in ourselves is what makes the difference. And I have told you again, and I tell you again, from my point of view and from Carolyn's, I am the best preacher in the low-price field. And I have gotten a long ways with that self-confidence as the best in the low-price field. The mental picture that you have of yourself has a great deal to do with your ability to handle the issues that come, no matter what your occupation is. Nurses, salespersons, people that deal in real estate, students in school, the father or mother, or grandma, grandpa even, or the cook in the kitchen, the mechanic that works on your car, the ability to have a sense of self-esteem, that they know who they are and what they're doing. The picture that you have of yourself determines the ability to perform and to do the job that is yours. The effectiveness is based on your mental picture. Self-confidence. It is that interior capacity to handle the stress, the issues. It's the courage to take on new things that you've never experienced before, and you say, I think I can do it. It is your past experiences that you have that gives you the courage to try something new and not be afraid. It is only with good self-esteem and self-confidence that you can meet the requirements of daily living. It's not something far off in the future, but it's stuff that you might have to deal with this afternoon or tomorrow or one day this week. Now, many of us have been to surgery and been cut open and looked at and stuff put in, stuff taken out. I can tell you all kinds of stories that. But I'll tell you one thing, I do not want some surgeon that really doesn't know what he's doing and is doubtful cutting on me. We don't want surgeons that do not have self-confidence. We don't want a lawyer dealing with our case and a lazy judge that's going to hear it either. And as I was working on this sermon this week, the garbage man came down through that, and I said, we don't want any messy garbage man either. Nor do we want a carpenter working on the house that can't hit the nail on the head. And I would hope that you don't want a skeptical preacher in your pulpit. We want people working and dealing with you and me in very personal ways that have a sense of self-confidence, a knowledge of what they're doing, and ability to get that job done. And we are now adult people. We're not the children that we used to be. And so we can bring together all of these experiences that we have to strengthen us in facing the issues that are ours day by day. The picture that you have of yourself determines your attitudes. It determines your behavior. It has to do with a habitual way of doing things. Ms. Peterman and I were talking earlier about one of her friends that had a very precise, disciplined manner of living, of getting up at a certain time, doing exercise, eating properly, going for long walks. Those are the things from self-confidence that gives you the habits of life and enables you to carry through. And you know, what other people think about you is not nearly as important as what you think about yourself. Indeed, that's what happened to us as we were growing a little bit in those earlier years, is we were too focused on other people and what they were calling us. They were chasing us. They were doing us dirty. And so that gave us that lower self-esteem. But now as adults, we've accumulated some things along the way that will help us out. Now, when you start reading the gospel and get acquainted with Jesus, you'll discover that Jesus is right down the line on 21st century psychology. couldn't be better. When Jesus says, as a person thinks in their heart, so is he, or so are they. As a person thinks in their heart. Now back in those days, they thought the heart was where your mind is today. We could say, as a person thinks in their mind, so is he. Jesus is right on target. We need to listen to what he has to say. We can trust him. So I want to think for a moment with you on several things that I have personally learned. As I have said, all these sermons are biographical, autobiographical really, on how to strengthen your self-confidence. And that first step is to visualize and imagine yourself as a competent, able person. You may not be as competent and as able as you want to be, but you've got something there to get started on. And so you see yourself as reliable and trustworthy, as one who can do the job if you really have to get it done. And that's true with our even being a grandma and a grandpa. When those little kids come around, we've got to know the business of taking care of them and how to talk to them in the right way. So the vision that you have of yourself is the first step. The second one is to work on negative attitudes. It's so easy for all of us to begin to be negative. Eliminate the I can't. Don't say I can't. Say I'll try. I can remember a little story we read in about the second grade when we had first learned to read. Maybe you read it too, about the little locomotive going up a hill. And as it got to the foot of the hill, it started chugging away. And it started saying, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. I believe I can, I believe I can, I believe I can. I know I can, I know I can. I know, and it goes over the top of the hill. That to me is part of this whole process of changing from a negative attitude into a positive attitude. Get rid of any self-criticism of saying, I can't do it, I'm stupid, I made too many mistakes, I know I can't handle this. These things can get to you. Get rid of your pessimism. Begin to be optimistic. When we lived in Athens, we had several sharing groups in that church. There was one group of men, about 6 or 8 of us, that would meet for lunch on Thursday. And this was back in the 70s. And on one of those occasions, we would talk about the Bible and stories and about our needs. We would pray together. And one of those fellows there said, Preacher, you're just too cynical and pessimistic. You got to get rid of that stuff. And as I say, this is part of the autobiographical part of it. Indeed, I was pessimistic. As I said in a sermon earlier, I was griped with the way my appointments had been handled by district superintendents and the bishop. I was pretty well griped with the politics of what was going on in America, in Washington, D.C., and around our nation in those days, and I was rather cynical. And this fellow said, I wasn't aware of that. He said, you've got to deal with your cynicism and your pessimism. A little bit later on, Carolyn and I were able to go to a seminar up in New York City, starting on Wednesday with Norman Vincent Peale, Wednesday through Sunday at his church on Marble Collegiate. And that turned me around 180 degrees in my belief in a positive mental attitude. I'm here to tell you, you and I need to work on our negative attitudes. And then the other side of that coin, number 3, is to count your blessings. And one of the best things that I have discovered along my way is to write stuff down on a piece of paper. I shared some of those with you a couple of sermons ago with some of the poetry that I read, some of the scriptures in the books of the Bible that I had written down. I suggest to you to write down the good things that you count today, the home that you live in, the health that you have, the doctors that take care of you, your family, your children, your grandchildren, the talents that you have. Every one of us has a talent, a gift from God of some kind or another. Put that down. Put down the people that are trusting and dependent upon you. There may be just one or two. But what I'm saying is you put it down on a paper, and there you can visualize it, get it out of your mind out there. Put down all of the recognitions and awards that you had along the way as you were in an active working style of living. And you take these things that you've written down, these blessings and these assets, and you build on them as you go. They become the building stones for strengthening your own self-confidence. Now, I have to confess I have more self-confidence now than I had when I was a teenager. I have more now than when I was 30, more than when I was 40. I have a pretty good bit of self-confidence right now, to tell it like it is. As a husband, as a father with 4 kids and 9 grandchildren, I have self-confidence as a grandfather dealing with those little ones. And I have confidence as your pastor during this time of your time in putting up with me. These are parts that bring together the nuts and bolts to tighten up our self-confidence and our self-esteem. Now, fourth stage, a step to take, is to do your homework. Whatever the task is, get good and ready to do it. Plan it, organize it, study it out, think it through. Whether you've got to give a report, or whether you're going to make a speech, whether you're going to sing a solo here in church, or participate in the anthem, or whether you're going to play a musical instrument, whether there's a meeting that you've got to go to give some report, you keep on working to get that together. Do the homework. That's very important. One of the things that I learned in public speaking is to say these 3 things to yourself, and I say it to myself now. Nobody knows the subject here today on self-confidence better than I do. Now, I say that to myself. Some of you may be specialists in self-confidence, but I'm willing to say that I know more about self-confidence right now while I'm talking about it than maybe 2 or 3 of you do. And the second thing that I say when I make a speech is they need to know what I'm going to talk about. Now, you may not think you need to know it, but I believe you do. If you don't need it today, you're going to need it 2 or 3 weeks later when some bully comes along and threatens you with road rage. And how are you going to deal with that? And the third thing is, I believe I can do it. I'm ready. In working on my sermon this morning before I came over here, I took out a whole card of stuff that I was going to tell you about because I didn't think we needed it. So when you're hot, you're hot. And when you're not hot, you're not hot. But you meet your responsibility because you believe in yourself, and that self-confidence is there. And here's another very important step is don't compare yourself to anybody else. Don't ever do that in anything you do. Don't look at somebody else and say that I'm weaker, sorrier. Don't compare with others in their position or their status, their wealth, or whatever it is. When I was starting out in the ministry, in seminary, I had a 4-point circuit down in Newnan. I lived in a home on the weekends with a family. They rented a room for me rather than my living in the parsonage, which was rented out since I was single. They had a maid that would come in and prepare lunch for them, for the husband and wife, Mr. and Ms. Wadsworth. And Rosa was her name. And I still have written down in memory what she had to say. She said, each tub has got to sit on its own bottom. I said, what in the world does that mean, Rosa? She said, each person has got to be themselves and they've got to do their job. You can't do it for them. Each tub has got to sit on its own bottom. And one monkey don't make the show. Well, that has stuck with me because what she's talking about here is you don't compare yourself to other people that are in your peer group or that are in the choir with you or in the congregation or in the workforce where you are. Nobody can do the job like you do it because you have gifts and talents that make it unique and different from other people's tasks in the way they would do it. Others would make a different speech. You get another preacher and he can talk about self-confidence in a different way. But you see, all of us have certain common experiences along the journey that we've been. All of us have encountered some sorrows, some bad days. All of us have had some sickness in our personal life probably, or somebody that's very close to us in the family. And there are times we have had the tough times. And there are times in the past that we did strike out. But there were other times when we got a hit. Maybe not a home run, but we got on second base or third. And we did score some points a little bit when somebody else got it in. So we've had some wins along the way. We've had both the negative and the positive experiences. And the negative and the positive is what has shaped our lives. If you women will look at the ring that I gave you, the hammer marks in that ring are symbols of the positive and the negative influences in your life. And one of those negatives that I alluded to on the paper I gave you says that you might have flunked algebra in the the 8th grade. That's one of the negatives. We've had the positive and the negative. They have shaped us physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, socially. Now, Paul asks the question, if God is for us, who's against us? And he goes on and says, we're more than conquerors through him that loved us. And so, if you got to do it all again, at least say, yes, I'm a child of God. I'm a creature of God. So, the 6th step in strengthening your self-confidence is look to God to help you in whatever task you have to handle, because he will do that. Tough times, he comes to you. Your personal faith gives you strength to deal with the issues of the day. The text is 2 verses separated in this 27th Psalm. The Lord is the strength of my life. In this I will be confident. The worth that you have to God is not based on your status. Your worth to God is not based on your income or your wealth or your home or any accomplishments that you have. As one of our inner city dudes said, God don't make no junk. God has created us in his image. We are his children. And so God is there to help us all along the way, whatever the issue is. He will give us the strength. Think back on some of these Bible stories that you probably learned as a little child. The confidence that God gave. Here's old Moses, called by a burning bush out of the north country to come back south to deal with Pharaoh. Can you imagine old Pharaoh being approached by Moses, this weather-worn fella out of the desert, telling him, let my people go? The confidence that God gave to David, a young fella, as he goes out to cross the gully to take on the big giant Goliath, the Superman of the Philistines. And God gave David the confidence to take that on. Think about Daniel in his lion's den, the confidence that God gave him. Think of the confidence that Paul had in the writing of his letters as he was facing and dealing with the Roman Empire. Think of the confidence that God gave to Jesus when he bore the cross. You see, this same power, this same confidence, this same help of long ago is available to you and me today. And we receive it by our trust and faith in God. If we don't trust and have faith, we don't get it. But if we do, then it comes to us through God's gift and his grace. What is the Pharaoh that you face? How many lions are in the den that you have to deal with? And what Goliath is over there cursing at you and challenge you to come on and take him on? Well, I'm here to tell you that your deep trust and faith in God is what gives you self-confidence and self-esteem. Because God is with you, God will help you, and God makes you strong. I come back to my text. The Lord is the strength of my life. Will you say that? The Lord is the strength of my life. In him I shall be confident. In him I shall be confident. You believe that verse deeply in your heart, and you can deal with the problems that come to you day by day. The Lord is the strength of my life. In this I will be confident. Now let us pray. Speak to our hearts, O God. Help us to hear your whisper in our minds and our hearts and souls, that you claim us as your children, and your grace, love, and mercy is there to guide, help, protect, and enable us to face the issues along our way. Help us, O God, to be strong in our faith and trust in thee. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.